there is also this speech by Macbeth towards the latter part of this scene, which is again a bit longer than the previous long narrative we discussed, where Macbeth is saying, "Who can be wise amazed, temperate and furious, loyal and neutral in a moment? No man." So he's pondering, he's talking more and more about how Duncan was so good a person, and here lay Duncan, his silver skin laced with the golden blood. So the reference of these brilliant metals to Duncan is highlighting his purity and his graciousness and his greatness steeped in the colors of their trade, and that he had a heart to love and a courage. So the association of love, courage, purity and greatness and kindness and loyalty and neutrality is all associated with Duncan to highlight what great a person he was. And here, of course, Macbeth's speech is working both as a eulogy, eulogy, as well as a constructed lamentation. Why constructed? Because here he is really not concerned about the dead, because he has perpetrated death itself. And Malcolm and Donalbain, in these very two important asides with each other, realize that whatever Macbeth is saying is constructed to a certain extent, and therefore they discuss within each other, why do we hold our tongues, that most may claim this argument for ours? What should be spoken here, where our fate? And they become so afraid that they feel that just like Macbeth is here construing grief here, he will immediately construe blame on the sons of Duncan. And Lady Macbeth's response, of course, is one of a bodily construction. She is deliberately fainting. Again, a very female-like and a stereotypical female-like gesture of the constructed nature of the lamentation, or a demonstration of grief. And that is how they construe the scene. But it's also important that after all of them leave, the discussion between Malcolm and Donalbain is important to understand the further logistics of the play, because they decide to flee from Scotland to England, and to Malcolm to England to seek the help of the English king there, namely King Edward the Healer, about whom we had discussed a little bit when we were discussing all of the characters in the play in the first part of the first of the online lessons. And the second is the second place where the other son goes, that is Donalbain. He goes to Ireland. They decide to go to different places, of course, to seek more help, but also so that they are not able they are not tracked easily. And Malcolm, in the very last lines of the play, says that there's warrant in that theft which steals itself, and there's no mercy left. They realize that Scotland is a place where no more grace and mercy will be shown, because here something terrible and something horrendous has taken place. The next scene, and the final scene of Act 2, that is scene 4, takes place outside Macbeth's castle, and a very important interaction between Ross and a common old man, who continue the kind of discussion and the kind of conditions of nature which Lennox was talking about in scene 3. And it's an interaction between a courtier and a common man, and therefore we understand that whatever these courtiers are witnessing are also being witnessed by common people at large. And therefore the old man saying, 70 I can remember well, within the volume of which times I have seen. So if Lennox was saying that within the limited number, within a very few years that he has lived on this earth, he hasn't seen something so terrible and horrendous in nature, in the condition of nature. And then here it is Shakespeare's way of saying that even an old man hasn't seen such a sore, quote unquote, such a sore night. And he's a person with a lot of experience. And the old man is saying that it is unnatural, even like the deed that's done. So here the murder of Duncan very clearly is being stated by Shakespeare as an unnatural act. And that unnatural act of the murder of the king is being reflected in the macrocosm, say through a falcon towering in the pride of place was by a mousing owl hawked at and killed. So a little owl could destroy a great bird like the falcon, always associated with kingly authority, kingly command, and the kingly position. Therefore, someone below the rank of a king, say a person like the courtier Macbeth, could kill a falcon like great ruler like Duncan. This is the comparison that Shakespeare is making, and there's a further comparison of the animal imagery, but of course a very brutal one, where Duncan's horse is a thing most strange and such, and beauteous and swift. The minions of their race turn wild in nature, and finally they ate each other. So whatever turmoil has taken place in Duncan's life, that is, his life is ended in death, and in a gruesome and a most murderous death. That's the kind of end which his beautiful horses have also endured when they ate up one another. And Ross is saying, is it known who did this more than bloody deed? And Macduff is saying that after this discussion between Ross and the old man, there's also a short conversation between Ross and Macduff, and where Macduff says he's one of the first people to realize, other than Malcolm and Donalbain, realize that Macbeth's grief is constructed, but they are not really sure whether Macbeth has committed this murder. But Macduff is one of those people who realizes that since Macbeth was so swift in killing the guardsmen, therefore he could be someone who would have a reason to murder the king, and now that Macbeth is the only one who can claim the throne, therefore it makes Macduff more suspicious. And Macduff says he's already named and gone to Scone to be invested, and that Macbeth has already gone to proclaim himself king. And then they also discuss that Malcolm and Donalbain has fled to Fife, and then the scene ends and the act ends with the old man, God's venison go with you, that is, God's graciousness and God's goodness, grace go with you, and with those that make good of bad and friends of foes. And here the old man is here really trying to talk about a kind of a reconciliation. At the beginning of this scene, he has talked about upheaval in nature against things becoming unnatural, but towards the latter part of the scene, he's talking about things becoming natural, if possible, that even out of enemies, if one could make friends, and even out of bad, if one could make good. This is also, the short scene is also about the whole structure of the play, that even though the play is talking about upheaval, even though the play is talking about things unnatural, there will also be an attempt in the scope of the play to turn things into natural, to move towards reconciliation. Thank you.